Hi, welcome to the first lecture of the Great Depression. Today we're going to talk about the start of the Depression and basically the stock market crash of 1929 and kind of setting off the whole Depression era here. So we'll go through it and get into it here. So there's economic troubles that are coming through in the 1920s. So big businesses are barely turning a profit. For example, railroads, textiles, and steel. They're not making much money. Prosperity during wartime led farmers to expand. Post-war, the demands dropped, crippling farmers. So farmers expanded their farms in order to meet the supply or the demand needs of Europe during the war. And once that war is over, they're starting to produce their own food again, and that those markets dry up, and now they have too much, and they're actually going to start losing money. So consumers begin to have less money to spend, and 70% of families earn less than the minimum needed to have a decent standard of living. And they're not below the poverty line, but they're not having the excess money to spend on frivolous goods that may not be necessary. All right, so as we know, in 1928, Herbert Hoover becomes president, or is elected in 28 and becomes president in 29. And he has a forecast for our country that's quite amusing. He says we in America are nearer to the final triumph over poverty than ever before. Kind of looking at the prosperity of the 1920s, but now moving into the 1930s and the stock market crash, we know this to be a quite amusing statement, the fact that we have more in poverty than ever before. So he's a well-liked man. He served as Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge, and he was kind of next in line. He won an easy victory in 1928 over the Democrat Alfred Smith. The prosperity of the 20s and having Republican presidents, Harding, Coolidge, made it pretty obvious to keep electing Republican presidents because society had done so well and people vote with their pocketbooks, and them having a lot of money in their pockets made it a pretty easy decision to keep going with a Republican. So the stock market struggles are in sight. People do see things happening. Some economists saw the problems in the market, but a lot of people just avoided or ignored the warnings. They didn't really want to switch things up. Americans invested in the market, making it the symbol of U.S. prosperity. Our market was flying upwards, and there's just a lot of people making a ton of money, but the people making the money were the rich that were able to profit off and spare the money to actually buy during the 1920s. So there's two terms you need to know. One is speculation, and this is buying stocks and bonds with the hope of a quick profit. So you'd buy real quickly and then sell fairly soon after buying them in order to make a quick profit off that when the stock goes up. The next thing, which is really important, is buying on margin. So when you pay a small percentage of stock's price as a down payment and you borrow the rest. You can think of it as any big purchase that we make today, buying a car, buying a house. You put 10%, 20% down, and you borrow the rest of the 80 or 90%. And they were doing this, but they were doing it with stocks, and stocks don't really have a true value. The stock could collapse, and that could just all go away. So when you pay, say you pay $1 for a $10 stock, and you're borrowing the extra $9, if the stock is all of a sudden worth nothing, you lose that dollar, plus you owe $9 to more people. And so it's kind of this vicious cycle that really helps or allows things to collapse very quickly when it's not real money that we're necessarily playing with. When you sell, if you need to sell a car, you're still going to get value out of that car. With the stock, it doesn't necessarily happen. All right, so there's an economic or a recipe for economic collapse, and these are kind of all the factors that go into the economy collapsing. So we've talked about a lot of these, so just go through real quickly. It's a vast income inequality among consumers. So we have the top 1% earning most of the wealth in the society. Their profits and their financial well-being during the 1920s go up drastically, about 76%. While those earning below that are only rising about 7%. So there's an income gap similar to what people talk about today that is happening in the 1920s. The key industries are struggling to make profits. I talk about steel and farms and all those things. They're not making the money that they were making before. 70% of consumers living at the poverty line without safety net savings, so they haven't saved money, so if something bad happens, they have something to fall back onto. So people are living paycheck to paycheck, and then when they lose their jobs, they instantly have no money. They need to have something to balance that and to back them up in case something bad happens. So a lot of people have savings accounts that were of money that they can use in case of something bad happening. Okay, consumer spending it grinds to a halt because they don't have extra money. So all these, the refrigerators and radios and other gadgets that people were really excited to have are no longer being purchased because people don't have the money to purchase them. So we talk about farmers that are unable to pay their debt because they can't sell their products and they have foreclosures. The overuse of credit, when you borrow a lot of money, you can't pay it back. They come and take your stuff. Interest rates are high. You have to owe banks money. The banks aren't getting the money, so a domino effect of affecting the banks as well. And then the risky stock investments we talked about already. So the market crashes October 29th of 1929. It's nicknamed Black Tuesdays, or Black Tuesday, and shareholders frantically sell their stocks, and those who bought on credit were left with huge debts. So they couldn't just sell. It's not like they they spent $1. It's not like they lost $1. They lost $10. So they're owing 10 times what they actually purchased. It's not like they just lost their initial investment. It's 10 times their initial investment. So if they bought $100 worth of stocks for $10, now they owe $100. It's just huge amounts of money. By mid-November, 2 weeks later, we have 30 billion lost, and 16.4 million shares of stock were dumped in one day. So it's an insane amount to think about. Real quickly on the financial collapse and where does all this money go? As I've talked about, it's not real money. People invest their money in stocks, and stock values are set by the assessment of how much a company is really worth. So only part of it is actually what the company produces. Some is like a projection of how well it's going to do. So if something bad happens to the company, the projection of something good happening goes away, and then that causes the value of the stock to drop. So you can lose money really easily. And then when you're buying on margin, it can go pretty quickly. So the collapse happens. So there's a banking panic in 1929 when millions just rush into banks. They feel like the banks are going to lose all the money, so they want to get their hands on the money that they believe is owed to them, which is their money that they put in the banks for the banks to keep. And everyone goes in, and the way that banks work, they don't necessarily have all the money in hand. They're only really required to hold about 10% of the money that they technically own in the banks. The rest they invest, and that's why you get interest rates, and you can make money by putting your money in the bank, because the money takes most of the money. The bank takes most of the money and invests it in other places. So when everyone comes in to get their money, they don't have that money, so they were forced to just close and say, "We don't have the money. We can't give it to you." So people really start to panic. So between 1929 and 1932, the gross national product is cut nearly in half, from 104 billion to 59 billion, meaning we're not producing anything. So if we're not producing anything, our economy becomes stagnant and flat, and it falls. So millions go bankrupt, countless businesses go under, unemployment reaches 25%. So 1 out of 4 people, and as we talk about, not most women did not work during the time. So it's not like it was 1 in 4 people. It was almost half of households don't have any income coming in. So Hoover tries to stop this, and in order to try to promote business within, he creates the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which is the highest regulatory tariff in U.S. history. So it prevents other countries from earning American currency to buy American goods. Other countries retaliate, and they don't allow us to buy their goods, and they don't allow us to sell in their countries. So it just drops world trade by 40%, which basically puts the whole world into an economic collapse. You can see a little diagram here of the stock market. The Dow Jones is what we use to assess the market on how well the market is doing. You can see in 1929 we have stocks up in the 380s, and then on Black Tuesday you see a drastic drop of 150 points almost, and that's Black Tuesday, and then it recovers, but then it falls back, and you can see it going down to almost nothing later on. So we have the cause of the depression. We've kind of talked about all this. So we have tariffs and war debt policies that cut down foreign markets. We have reparations being paid by Germany and them trying to rebuild over there. There's not that many markets to go to. The farm sector is struggling. Easy credit, which people can't afford, and then the unequal distribution of income. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening.